audio?
Both.
Cool.
Evan, should I put the background back on? Does it look better if I have this or the background?
I would prefer the background because that just looks like you're sitting in a like a dimly
A hotel room. An undisclosed location.
like a summer apartment in Ocean City with old beer.
Hey, don't make fun of my drab blinds.
Yeah.
My beige, beige contractor paint.
All right, let me get a little sound check on myself.
I'm gonna top up my tipple here real quick.
I am good. Everybody refresh your drinks. We'll get rolling in one moment. Nice.
I also got a new camera.
Okay.
This has a little forward-facing light
Okay.
to
Computer.
What?
For the computer.
Yeah.
Cool.
My other webcam stopped working.
Yeah,
So
this
this one,
quality lighting is achieved by me putting my lamp with no shade right in front of my face. Let me get a beer. I'll be right back.
I have to say, like, Casey, having you listen to Zero Day is a little bit of a nightmare. Because like having somebody who actually knows this shit listen to it is just like I have no idea what I got wrong. And like if you get like beyond a certain depth, it's like, well, you know, the IPMAP like protocol was changed in 1991, but then they changed it with DDoS like 121.
Oh, God,
Like, idiots. Crazy. You know, it's just like it gets so thick so fast. And like and it's just like so it's like one of those things that like it's really easy to get like it just feels like you're walking through a landmine, like a minefield, like blindfolded and drunk and just like hoping you survive.
Especially because the people that might be listening to this looking for you to fuck up are gonna like dogpile on you on Twitter, or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fortunately, nobody heard it, so it worked out fine.
You guys ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, we are back from break, and we are joined by a friend of the show, longtime friend of mine from college. Go Seahawks, John Heltman. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, and go Seahawks.
Yeah. John is the host, or former, well, always the host. It's now all evergreen content of not one, but 3 podcasts. One entitled Bank Shot, a podcast about banking. Another called Nobody's Home.
Banks, finance, and the world we live in.
There you go.
My man.
Nobody's Home, a podcast about derelict homes in America, but also in Baltimore. A lot of that content in Baltimore. And the newest one that came out a few months ago is entitled Zero Day, about cyber security. So before we get into the most recent project, John, I want to go back and talk about an episode of Bank Shot, which you should subscribe to. It's actually kind of cool, unless you have no interest in learning about LIBOR. Maybe not so much.
The LIBOR is like the LIBOR is always the highest risk, lowest reward topic that we've ever done. This is true in podcasting and elsewhere, just because like there are people who geek out intensely on it.
Sure.
And if you get something not even like wrong, but just like not to their liking, you hear about it.
Right.
But most people are just like, I'm so bored, I will die.
They use that episode to go to sleep.
Yeah, exactly. It's the most non-habit forming sleep aid available on the market.
But you did an episode very recently about something I had never thought of or knew existed, or maybe it's a concept that's now on the horizon. It's using the post office as a bank.
Yeah.
What? That doesn't make any sense until you listen to the episode and you start to realize, like, oh yes, there is a barrier to entry for a lot of people to banking.
Yeah.
Folks that live out in the middle of nowhere, those are below a certain income threshold, yada yada yada. So tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, postal banking is this sort of idea that's been around. In the banking world, the idea has been sort of circulating as a solution to what we call financial inclusion. So I think it was in the podcast, and I don't have the exact number in front of me, but there's something like, so there's 150 something million households in the United States, and there's like 8.5 million of them have no bank account at all. I don't know what percentage that is, but it's like, wait, that can't be right. That would make it 150. Okay, yeah, so that is right. So it's like, I don't know, 5% or something of like households are unbanked.
It's more than nothing, and it should be nothing.
Yeah, it is like a really big, and this is like any kind of like a checking account where you have a debit card, you can go to your bank or a ATM card, and can put your money in that rather than like in a coffee can like under your bed. And a lot of people don't have that. And
is that by choice or because they don't have the option? Because like I know there's some like crazy people out there that are like, I don't want the government knowing how much money I have, and
right, and there's
like a
people
whole separate category.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, the thing is like, I don't think there's perfect understanding of why people are underbanked. I think people give reasons why they're underbanked, but they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. So you can be underbanked because by choice, but is that a choice based on experience? Like you got a bunch of overdraft fees and you're just like, you know what, I'm done with this. And so I guess we don't really like, there is some population of people who are unbanked because like they don't want their assets to be known for like, so they can dodge child support or something, like, or they are unbanked because the money they got is money they stole, or there's actually like a lot of undocumented immigrants don't want to be in the financial system because that can kind of like track them. Not all, but that is, and there's also like banks kind of have, if you open a bank account, you can't just be like, my name is John Smith and I live at 123 Main Street, like you have to show some documents. Yeah. So there is some of that, but there are also like a lot of people that don't bank because they don't really have the opportunity. And there's a lot of different like reasons for that. And so the idea of postal banking is like, well, what if we made it so that you could open it, basically a bank account at the post office. So every post office is a place where you can send your packages, but at the same time, in that same trip, you can deposit a check, maybe you can already make money orders at the post office, but like maybe get a cashier's check, or, there are versions of this that suggest that they would also offer like low interest, like small dollar loans, which complicates things somewhat, but like the basic idea, like when you say postal banking, the image that comes to mind always looks the same, which is you go to the post office and you do banking shit, but the back end of that is really a very wide open question, and the sort of the implications of whatever kind of version of the back end of that you end up selecting has different implications for the consumer, for the financial services industry, and I can go on.
And that kind of kills two birds with one stone, right? Because there's also, in those areas that you're talking about, there's the problem of you've got a little post office with, they've got someone staffed for like 8 hours a day, and they may sell like 2 books of stamps. And so they're losing money by operating, on the real estate and paying people to work this location. And by combining that with a bank, you're kind of, you're spreading it out a little bit and making it more worth your while to pay for that location.
It also seems to me that if you give, the option of the small dollar loan seems risky to me because, as we all know, like the payday loan is a very tricky and nasty industry. And even if it's very low to no interest, I would not want to see the government getting involved in that, because that would just turn into a Republican talking point.
Yeah, the reason, so small dollar loans is also the subject of yet another Bank Shot podcast by my colleague Brendan Peterson, who did a very good job on it. And like the problem there is that the reason that small dollar loans is sort of like a term of art that includes like payday loans, car title loans, paycheck advance type stuff. But the point is that it's small dollar in the sense that it's not like a home equity line of credit or, a mortgage or something. It's or a small business loan or something. It's $500, $1,000, whatever.
But I absolutely love the idea that, instead of going to a check cashing place that's going to charge you some exorbitant, ridiculous fee to like just give you money for money, that the Postal Service would do that for you at even if it's a minimum or no fee whatsoever. It's just pure stimulus to me, because it's like you're exchanging cash for a check for cash that goes directly in the economy one way or the other. And it's not going to the pocket of some asshole who, is essentially being a predator to these unbanked individuals that, for whatever reason, they don't want to have a bank account or can't have a bank account.
Yeah, I mean, I think like to your question, Casey, about like, are the unbanked by choice, or are they unbanked because they don't have access to, or for whatever reasons don't have access to like traditional financial services? I think the evidence that it's not purely voluntary, or at least maybe that's not, I think I just like undermine my own point in my own head, but like there's obviously a market for this stuff, because there are check cashing places, there are, there's financial transactions, there are financial transactions happening in rural places and in sort of like urban centers that don't have bank branches nearby. It's just all done outside of the banking system. So like, you should be able to find some sort of way of getting that activity inside the banking system at a much more favorable rate to the consumer, right? With postal banking, as I said, it makes sense. It has like a sort of like, there is a sort of synergy that is just sort of obvious. It's like you have post office that isn't doing maybe enough, that is physically located everywhere, is a name. Why not just have them do some of this stuff too? And if you agree with that premise, then the next step is like, okay, well, how do you do it? And that's where it just kind of gets a little bit complicated. And like, one of the things that kind of came up in the piece was like, if what you have so there are only a handful of like actual pieces of legislation out there that spell out how somebody might approach this. One of them is a bill from Kirsten Gillibrand. I think it was introduced in 2018, and that one includes, it says like small checking accounts. So whereas a normal checking account is FDIC insured up to 250,000, these would be limited to, I think, 20,000 or it's a floating, it's the greater of two options, $20,000 or like 25% of the average deposit level, as reported by the FDIC. This doesn't matter. But it's smaller than like a normal bank account. It's limited. You can't put $10 million in that account, is the point.
That's bullshit.
And like, so they have checking savings accounts, and small dollar loans of like $500 or again indexed to some sort of like core inflation or something. And there's a lot of discussion in that bill about like what would happen to like the sort of profits that would come to the post office under this scheme. But what was sort of something that was put to me by, admittedly opponents of postal banking was like, what you're talking about is offering like basically like the like 5 least profitable like banking services that exist and putting them under the roof of the post office and sort of supposing that somehow the post office is going to be able to do this at a profit in a way that like banks and credit unions don't. Like checking is not a moneymaker for anyone. Like,
nor should it be, because I think for the elderly of us or the people that just don't have access to electronic money yet, it's something that it just has to be there. And this is like the bridge to the fully electronic age to me. And it's like, yeah, it's not going to be money, but people got to be able to do things. And
yeah. I just mean like, I don't mean like checks, like writing checks. I just mean like your checking account from which
right.
you're.
Oh yeah, I understand that.
Your bills and stuff.
And I do think that they're already sort of antiquated at this point, because every checking account that has quote interest attached to it is like 1%.
I sort of forget that checking accounts are supposed to accrue interest, because it's like a penny every 13 years or something. It's and like savings accounts are basically the same way and have been for a while. But
I started to look into, money market or like CDs and stuff like that. They all have the same rate of return no matter how long you sit on them. It's stupid.
yeah, you can get 2% if you put your CD in for like 36 months or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Like I've not looked into this even sort of recently, but the point is that like, how is this going to make money for, like, if this is supposed to be something that makes money for the post office, that's one thing. Or if the policy goal you're trying to achieve is shoring up funding for the post office, that's one thing. If the policy goal you're trying to achieve is expanding sort of financial access to financial services for people don't currently have them, that's like another thing. But I think the argument that you can kill two birds with one stone is like kind of, I'm not saying it's impossible, and I'm not even saying that, and I think that that's something that should be pursued, but as of yet, like, it isn't quite rock solid,
No, it's still kind of pie in the sky to me, but it sounded good. And I have the perfect methodology for the Postal Service to make money at these locations with a operating bank and, shipment center. Put in a poke bowl bar.
Hey.
You go in, you cash your paycheck, and you look at that poke bowl, and you're like, I'm craving that pineapple and ahi tuna.
Evan, I know you're a dedicated listener to Bankshot.
Uh-huh.
You may recall from the first season my idea about the burrito bank.
Yes, I texted you about that after the right, burrito bank. I forgot. Whole episode.
Yeah, there you go.
Please reiterate this idea for the rest of us, because
so this was a sort of like an Easter egg at the end of an episode we did about the branch of the future, sort of like the sort of economic case for bank branches, right? The short story of that is that like they're expensive to keep up, foot traffic is down, a lot of people don't do their stuff at bank branches anymore, and banks are closing them. And I talked with a sort of community banker in Kansas City who sort of had this very impassioned speech about why, basically like his bank branch in Kansas City that I visited is like a mix between it's like a WeWork with a bank. Like it's pretty awesome actually. Like I would work, if they had that in my neighborhood, I would work there every day if COVID didn't exist. But at the end of that, I had a little Easter egg about, because like part of the thing was about like how people are trying to draw people into their branches, how banks are trying to draw customers into their branches, and they bake cookies, they have popcorn, like they give you coffee, like whatever. And I was saying how when me and my then girlfriend, now wife, were first dating, like pretty early on, I like woke up in like 3 a.m, and I was like, Maggie, like, I figured it out. Like I've got the $1 million idea. Like we can, like, we're settled. She's like, just like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, go to sleep. I was like, no. Listen. I just want to say this so I don't forget it. It's a genius idea. She's like, okay, what is it? It's a burrito bank. She's like, oh, what the fuck are you talking about? It's like, it's a bank, but you get burritos. Like you can also get a burrito at the bank. So obviously I was hungry and I was broke. That's what that was going on in my subconscious at that time.
right.
And I actually looked into it. You can't do that because there's like commercial, like you can't offer kind of commercial services in a bank.
Oh,
So yeah, there's like,
I did not know
and
that.
you also can't be like, there's restrictions about like, it's the Commerce Clause. Like you can't be a like shoe store and also like a bank. Like,
So it can't be
Well,
like
you
a
can eat
Starbucks
a
inside
potato
of
bar in a
Target.
bank.
there's some graying of that, or there's some blurring of those lines with like industrial loan companies, which are kind of like, that's what Walmart tried to do when it tried to start a bank 15 years ago, which is another thing that's actually going to be a topic of Bankshot in the next couple of months. If you have any listeners left that are still with us, I commend you. I commend your dedication to the city that breeds. I am not trying to bore you to death.
All we have to do is pepper in some jokes here and there, and people will be interested. But so pivoting a little bit, well, transitioning, I should say, and I haven't.
Whoa.
Thank you, Casey. So from a production standpoint, you've got two of these spin-off podcasts that are, limited run,
Right.
0 days, 5 episodes, which, by the way, it's very dense material, but it's like 22 to 25 minutes per episode, and it's a total of like 2 hours of listening.
Yeah.
I literally had to re-listen to 2 or 3 of these just to be like, what the fuck are they talking about? Which we'll get to that in a second, but the nobody's.
That's my style. That's how I do.
Right. It's
that's
like,
the Heltman difference right there.
It's kind of collegiate level in terms of the delivery. It's like listening to a college lecture, but like with fun burrito bank anecdotes and stuff like that. But the Nobody's Home podcast, like you did a lot of traveling for that. You went like across country to like Kansas and stuff like that.
Yeah. That one was, so that was like the first, that was like kind of the proof of concept of this whole thing. Like so we had been, I say we, the American Banker, people have been talking about like we should do a podcast for like, I joined in 2014. I think 2015 was the first time that we started talking about like we should have a podcast, and just kind of never, I don't know. It's just one of those things that like it didn't exist, and there wasn't any plan to make it exist. And so we didn't know what it was going to be. Actually, I remember like talking to you, Evan, for a while, because I was like, what if we did like an American, like a banking, financial regulatory podcast that was basically like The City That Breeds,
right?
But about, and just like,
hilarious
I was like,
jokes about banking.
And it became a reality, and this is it right here. Hilarious jokes about banks.
Was that the same night that we decided we wanted to be cops?
It might have been, yeah. Back when we joined the force.
Yeah.
It's like that Simpsons where Bart wakes up and he's in a Cub Scout uniform.
Yeah, what was that? That's not the Boy Scouts. It's the something Scouts. Anyway.
Right, the Truth Scouts or something. I don't know.
But in that same scene, Barney wakes up on a naval vessel and he says, "Oh no, not,
not again."
Classic.
So they kind of let me, like a lot of that travel was just like travel I was doing anyway, and I just kind of like found a sort of way to have a conversation while I was there. Like the St. Louis thing was, I talked to somebody at the St. Louis Fed, and I was just there for a conference and said, "Hey, by the way, I'm doing this thing on vacant housing." They're like, "Oh, well, our chief economist could talk to you for an hour about that."
Yeah, one of the blurbs or yarns in that podcast was about the kit homes that you could buy out of like the catalog. And I'm not so sure, but I think there are still a few of them left in the sort of Essex area.
So what's weird is that there's several in Baltimore. There's like, I sort of expected that woman. I just Googled Sears houses. Her name came up. I sent her an email. Half an hour later, she said, "Sure, when are you ready?" I said, "How's now?" She said, "Okay." Like, and like that thing came together so quickly, or like maybe in like over the course of a day. Same thing with that guy that I talked to about the sort of drug policy in the 6th episode, where I was like walking around Broadway East.
Oh, that's right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And that guy I just like called in an afternoon, and like that came together super quickly. But the apparently I was expecting her to be like, yeah, so like 3,000 kid homes were built and only like 6 exist today. Like that was like kind of what I thought she was going to say. And she's like, I think so 3,000 were built and like only 6 have been torn down since like 1920 or whatever.
Yeah,
like
I think there's a pit beef spot. Hannah, what's that place called? Damn it. I went
on the spot, Hannah. Come on.
Yeah, I went on a road trip with friend of the show, Allison Robicelli, to do a pit beef feature for the Washington Post, and we landed upon this kit house community that is on top. Well, it has a pit beef stand and a bar right next to it, and I was like, "Oh my God, these are those kit houses that John's podcast was talking about."
They're still there, man.
Yeah, most of them are pretty well kept. I just couldn't believe it. But, a lot of the people that are living in those houses are like probably 70 plus.
I mean, it is kind of mind blowing to me that no one has figured out like how to, I mean, there are like economic reasons why it's hard to build a cheap house or to like figure out a cheap house. And like, I think tiny homes are kind of like the closest thing, but the only thing that's cheaper than that is refurbishing a vacant house. Like that's the cheapest way to create housing. And like,
yeah, unfortunately, but that it is such a, and I've seen a lot of vacant homes in my time, and those things are ready to collapse at best at times. And it's like,
and even then though, like you still have a structure, you know, like, I mean, it's not strictly true. I mean, like there's obviously like houses that need to be demolished for safety reasons and that, but like, especially row houses, because you have, they share walls. Like the structure is a block long, you know, structure fundamentally, right? And
yeah, that's true.
And so just like if you're just talking about fitting in whatever, I don't know how we got on this subject, but but it's just like it's the most cost effective, like dollar for dollar is the most cost effective way to actually like create like housing supply, like real actual, not tiny home housing supply or like mobile homes housing supply, but like actual like homes that could be lived in, is to rehabilitate homes. That's the most cost effective thing that you could do. And there's no program or interest whatsoever in sort of like pursuing that as an idea. It's like, well, we got to increase population density in the suburbs where it's not wanted, you know, like instead of rehabilitating houses in inner cities where it's desperately wanted and like desperately needed.
Very much.
Evan,
so.
I think what he's saying is that tiny homes suck.
I'm saying that if you had a tiny home colony, you might want to burn it down.
Hey!
And collect
all right, this interview is over.
No, I mean, tiny homes are cool and all. Like, I don't, it's like a niche thing, but like, that's not the solution, right? I mean, like, that's not the.
No, the
you can't raise your kids in 300 square feet, you know, like.
No, oh no, mine are like 700. I mean, these are luxury tiny houses connected with rope bridges.
Double wide.
Okay, not wide. They're 3 stories, all right? They have an observatory on the top. Okay, it's called the Alder Tower. Look it up.
5 feet by 8 feet by 32 feet.
That's exactly right. Going high, not wide. Anyway,
there you go.
That's enough of that. All right, the reason you're here is to talk about the new project, 0 Day.
Yeah, man.
Please describe what it is and what 0 Day is, because that's a term, apparently.
It is, yeah. So 0 Day was a working title that never got improved upon, which often happens. The series.
It's a great title.
Thanks, man.
I like it.
The only thing that I was nervous about is that there's like a movie called 0 Day. There's like several like podcasts whose title is like, I don't know if there's podcasts, but like there's a lot of like episodes of stuff called 0 Day. It's like it's sort of like if you wanted to start a banking podcast and you called it like it's in the bank or something, it's just like a little bit too obvious, you know?
X in the mail.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like but so a 0 Day is a sort of unexploited flaw. Like it is a, in case you keep me honest here, but like it's basically like, you know, in all of software everywhere there are flaws, and some of them we know about, some of them we don't know about. When we find it, when either a hacker or a white hat hacker finds a sort of exploit that no one's found yet, that's a 0 Day. It's a sort of
exploit. So the vulnerability that no one's patched yet. So and there's an exploit and there's no patch for it. So that is when it's discovered. That's 0 Day, and then
it becomes like a +1 day, +2 day. Like one thing I learned that actually apparently a lot of people didn't know, like in the course of doing the reporting, is that it comes from gaming, like from like 80s computer gaming. Like games would come out and they'd say it'll be out like September 8th or whatever. And if it leaked, like if it leaked out, like, and they had it the day of the release date, it was called a 0 Day. If they leaked out like 3 days before release, it'd be like a -3 day or something. And that's where like the term came from, but then it got kind of adapted to hacks and stuff. But the series is about cybersecurity, and fundamentally just like cybersecurity and the threat that it poses to the financial system. And and by extension, I mean, everybody and the sort of world we live in. And I had the idea for it right after I did Nobody's Home. I was like, we should do something on cybersecurity, because at that point we didn't have like a plan to do Bank Shot, which is more of like a going concern. It's like, it's like This American Life or something. It's another episode every week, but it carries on into the future. So we thought we were going to do more series like this. And my editor was like, so what do you think would be a good thing to try next? And I was like, I don't like cybersecurity. Like, it's just the first thing that popped in my head. And he's like, keep that idea. And so I sat on it for like years. And it was going to be part of Bank Shot last year. I kind of didn't get around to it. It was going to be the season finale for Bank Shot last year. And that didn't work out. And so we decided to do it as a sort of standalone series over the winter. And I didn't know much about cybersecurity before this, and I don't know much about it now, except that like it's like a huge problem that nobody cares about, which I thought would be a really attractive idea for a podcast, but it turns out because nobody cares about it, like
I think that people would care about it. People would care about it if they understood it, because it is very difficult to understand. But at the end of the day, the most basic message is like, we are under constant attack. Your identity and or your money could be stolen at any minute if the company that you've got your assets with aren't good at keeping it safe. And
I think go ahead.
It's exceptionally relevant to, financial industry, but it's also very relevant to like the medical industry,
right?
Keeping your medical records safe. And the podcast does, I think, a very good job of covering like the history of, we went from passwords to strong passwords to
two-factor authentication
to biometrics to the future question, like what's the next step of keeping your shit safe. And I never really thought about it like in terms of, I don't really care if somebody knows that I've watched a porn on my browser, but
hypothetically,
what started to freak me out was now we're entering the Internet of Things, where it's like your refrigerator has Wi-Fi and it can tell you the weather, but it can also tell you when your milk is low. And every single thing in this world is going to be an internet connected device that, if even a handful of them are vulnerable for some reason, somebody could potentially change the temperature in your house and kill your cat while you're on vacation. Or, as we saw in the documentary film Die Hard 4, gain control of a natural gas line and explode it in an effort to kill John McClane. And,
Yeah, that was a crazy time when John McClane got
He saved Baltimore.
Yeah.
Oh,
what a guy.
They filmed it in Baltimore.
And Kevin Smith helped.
He did. He was living out by Social Security. His name was like Wizard or something. Also, Social Security has a bunch of like liquid-cooled supercomputers in the basement. Who knew?
No, they don't.
I don't think they have super-cooled refrigerators at Social Security. This baby gets down to 55 degrees.
But yeah, it has a decent history lesson of like how the internet started and then how hacking quote began, and it seems like absolute light speed, but it's kind of not, because the technology has developed almost literally at light speed since the 2000s or something like that.
There's something in there. So I don't know if this is a spoiler, because I'm not sure anyone's going to listen to this anyway, but like, we talked about basically the first computer, and that's a really kind of a very academic question. Like, what is the first computer? Like, there's someone would say like that mechanical star orbit machine from 600 BC that was found off the coast of Greece technically counts as the first computer. I forget what it's called, like an astrolabe or something. But the ENIAC is like thought of as really the first computer, because it was the first all digital computer. And that thing had, I think, like 60 bits. That was its computing power. And it was like the supercomputer of its time, and
used to calculate. You're underselling this. It was used to calculate
firing tables.
ballistics,
Yeah.
firing tables.
Yeah. Yeah, the thought that we went to the moon on 512 bytes or something like that.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
TI-83 has more.
Like way more.
Yeah, I mean, but this thing was like, so these firing tables, like people would do them by hand, and it took years. And like they're like, the war, like this war will be over, and the next 3 wars will be over by the time we like finish this. And they made this thing called the ENIAC for, I think it was like $300,000. That's like inflation adjusted, so it was like pathetically like a small amount of money. Although that inflation stuff is like sort of misleading, because like you're talking about different money supply, whatever. I'm getting beyond myself, but like the point is, it was like a relatively modest investment to create what is basically the first computer, and it did those tables in like 10 minutes or something. Like it just like was lightning fast. And again, that was like 60 bits. Like any server farm anywhere, just one of them does like 5 trillion times more computing power in a second than an ENIAC, than the ENIAC possessed in its entirety, like when it first came out. Like it has just exponential is an understatement to like how quickly the capabilities of computers have expanded in 3 generations.
Yeah,
Right.
it was in 40, 45, 46.
Yeah.
And I include Casey, you're a little younger than me, but like we're all part of a generation that grew up without the internet. And
yeah,
now we're
like remembers when the internet was like Prodigy,
Yeah, CompuServe. Now we're talking about, we're on the verge of like quantum computing and all this impossible to imagine stuff that is going to fundamentally change humanity. And the risk reward is so crazy on both sides. What were there any moments where you were speaking to some professional who you went down to the basement of Social Security where all the glowing blue computers were, and you spoke to somebody who basically laid out a scenario for you where it like chilled you, or was there something that was told to you that you had never even heard of, or something to that effect?
So as I said, this has sort of been marinating for a while, but the origin of this podcast was, I was at a Christmas party, I think it was like 2018 or something, and I was talking to, this is like a like DC like work related Christmas party, I forget where it was, and I ended up like kind of, those things are always like kind of awkward because you like see people but like people don't always want to just like hang out and talk to like a reporter and whatever. I was just
always do.
Yes. Yeah. Well, maybe I'm just bad at my job. I don't know. It's very possible. And like, I ended up like kind of sitting next to like a guy who was on like an IT desk at one of the banking like trade associations. And I was just like, so like, what's up? What's your job? And he was like, well, I work on da-da-da. And somehow we ended up talking, and I was like kind of interested in like, I don't know anything about this. And he started talking about quantum computing, and I was like, huh, like I've heard the words quantum and I've heard the words computing. I know that a quantum computer is a thing, but like, whatever, who cares? And he was like, yeah, I mean, he explained it to me like in a more succinct way than I'm going to explain it to you now. But like, basically like a quantum computer that has the processing power of like a TI-83 could crack every single password, like every public key encryption that exists today instantly. Like, and I was just like, wait, is that like, are you serious? He's like, oh yeah, that's like it's a big thing. And I was like, well, why is like, what are we going to do at that? And he's like, well, hopefully it doesn't happen for a while. Hopefully, Russia doesn't get it first. We're not really totally sure that it's possible. Yeah. But it's like, I was just like, holy cow, like this is like a, international arms race for kind of supercomputing power that like I've never even heard of. And then like years later, I finally got to put it into a podcast. That's the we talk about that in the 5th episode of the show. But I was so like that was something that I'd heard, and it kind of like blew my mind, and I was like, I need to put this into something somewhere. And the whole series was kind of like building up to that point. Like one of the things that was nice about this one is like I always knew where I was trying to go, you know. So that made landing it a little bit less complicated. And I was actually going to ask you guys, because you're the only people I've talked to that have actually listened to it.
Make it till you make it, John.
How did you think about the sneakers tie-in in the 5th episode? Did that land to your mind?
Oh yeah, yes, yeah, totally.
Right. I love that show. That movie.
That movie. Is that Robert Redford?
Robert Redford, who's actually the weakest performance in that movie,
right,
by far. Robert Redford, Sidney Poitier is in that. Ben Kingsley.
Wow.
River Phoenix is in that.
R.I.P.
Dan Aykroyd is in it.
R.I.P.
Poor guy.
So I haven't got to the 5th episode, but I think I know where you're going with when you talk about sneakers. So are you talking about how that was kind of the impetus for like the Star Wars program? Like Reagan was like either like heard like saw sneakers or maybe that was War Games.
So sneakers came out in '92. So
okay, not Reagan. So I'm thinking like War Games then.
Yeah, I think you're thinking of War Games. So sneakers, like, I've always loved that movie, and as soon as that guy in that Christmas party told me the story about quantum computing, I'm like, it's like in sneakers, and like I just always knew that I was going to do it that way, and I've never had so much fun making a podcast episode as I had making that one, and then no one listened to it, so.
Well, you just got to get on shows like this. And
I know. Yeah, spread the word.
Maybe, yeah, we'll put your.
Well, it doesn't help. It doesn't help, like, dropping a podcast about, like, hey, here's another thing to worry about in, like, the most, tense, like, uncertain time in the world. So I just blame fate for that.
I guess the timing was a bit ill, but are you going to be doing any Bank Shot episodes about, like, COVID? And I don't know.
We've done a lot of them. I mean, so this, this year this is like such a basic thing to say that, like, I had plans for this year and COVID ruined them. But, like, so I got a new job. It's the same place. I am going to be, or soon to be announced that I'm going to be the editor of American Banker magazine.
Ooh.
Yeah, thanks. And the sort of trajectory of this year was going to be that I was going to, like, kind of ease into doing a little bit more of that and try to kind of get Bank Shot to be less of a one-man band, get other reporters to kind of contribute and kind of have a stable of reporters that contributed to it, and kind of ease into doing kind of both of those things. And then COVID happened. And so the way we did Bank Shot last year is that, like, I kind of built up a kind of a backlog of episodes, and then we launched. And then I sort of, like, would try to work on new stuff, but always have something in the tank to kind of fill in the next, week. But, like, we did it every week. So, like, I was always, like, in a race against time for, like, when am I going to run out of, like, back episodes to, like, and have to take a break. And this year we went to every 2 weeks, and it's, like, completely sustainable. And I don't know why I didn't think of that sooner. But we just had to start, like, with nothing. Like, I just had to start writing an episode about COVID in March, and, and then put out the next one when the next one was ready. And it just turns out that's, like, about 2 weeks is the turnaround time. So we've done, this whole season has been about COVID, and, like, COVID related economic shit,
Yeah, I guess that's sort of the undercurrent of all of them.
It's the context, like, yeah. I mean, like, there was somebody I talked to that was just like, we had so many structural flaws in our financial system before this, and they just all caught fire at the same time. In terms of, like, sort of a lot of this has been plugged by, like, Federal Reserve, liquidity facilities, which, like, I think people have this, the kind of, like, money machine go burr meme implies that, like, the Fed is just printing gajillions of dollars. And it's like, it's a little more complicated than that. But, like, a lot of it is like in the case of, say, the municipal bond market, the Fed just kind of said, hey, we'll buy that if you don't want to. And everyone's like, oh, in that case, I'll buy it. So like they haven't actually like really done much. This is the last time I checked in on this, which was like in April. So maybe that's not current information, but a lot of times the Fed just says they'll be there and people are like, oh, in that case, cool. Like,
yeah, whatever's going on right now, and I don't know what it is because I'm not an economist, but I feel like this chill going down my spine. Like there is no reason that the stock market should be as high as it is.
Oh, have you not looked at the stock market today?
yeah,
No,
pooped.
did it take a shit?
Like tech went down hard today.
It
Well,
was overvalued though.
yeah, I was gonna say like everyone's dumping their money in it because of A, gambling, B, like there is no attractiveness in putting any money into any kind of bond market or anything like that. I don't.
You guys should tune in to next week's episode of.
Well, I will,
Shot.
and
It's on
no better
this
time than for
topic.
you to give plugs, John, because we are running out of time.
Oh, okay. Well, Bank Shot can be found wherever you find podcasts. You'd like this one. 0 Day, same thing. Nobody's Home. The award-winning series, I should say. Winner of the 2019 Grand Neal by the Jesse H. Neal Awards.
Wait, do you have an actual physical award?
I do. It's upstairs. I would show it to you.
You
Sorry.
dummy, you should have brought it.
I should just wear it around my neck. It's like it's a 5 pound like hunk of glass. I should just wear around my neck like Flava Flav.
That's pretty sweet.
But it's like just like a what's called not business journalism. B2B. So kind of like B2B journalism.
Ooh,
award.
before we get back to your plugs, let's just say that you and I we did a spin-off podcast. What
Yeah, man.
What do you think it would be about?
City that banks. No.
Banking in Baltimore.
Yeah. There's a topic that has staying power.
Ooh.
I mean, I did a part of one about how there's no like big kind of homegrown banks in Baltimore anymore.
Or if you want to be really timely, you could talk about black banking in Baltimore.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing that I've sort of worried about this season is like, you know, we've done a lot of things about financial inclusion. We've done a lot of things about, you know, kind of issues peripheral to just like straight up racism in banking.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say there's things coming, but like, you know, it's hard to kind of like do something straight up because like everyone's kind of doing it now.
That's true.
And then you know, Nobody's Home is very much like about race, you know, like it just can't be
absolutely, yeah.
misunderstood, or it can't be understood without understanding race. But yeah, so I mean, what should our spinoff show be?
I think you already came up with it. It's the Burrito Bank.
The Burrito Bank. You know, I gotta say, Evan, you know, it could be just like we could just talk about flats versus drummies.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, man, I searched my soul. I searched my heart, and I think I like flats.
Oh,
I think I like flats better than drummies.
good for you. Okay.
Just the way I feel.
Right.
Did you hear about the guy that was petitioning his local government to rename boneless chicken wings?
I did see that. Yeah, I didn't load because.
What are they just going to be called? Like bigger nuggets?
Chicken nuggets, I guess.
That's what they fucking are. They're just nugs.
So, do you remember that controversy where like a lot of like dairy state congressmen were being like trying to lobby to make it so you couldn't call almond milk. You had to call it like almond juice.
Almost juice.
Like it was like, it ain't milk. Milk comes from a cow. You don't milk an almond. Like just like, yeah, I guess. But it's like by that standard, like could anything that we call cheese really be called cheese? Like is American cheese by that standard?
No, it's a processed cheese food product.
Yes, exactly. But anyway, so on to plugs. You can find me on Twitter at John Heltman. You can find Bankshot on Twitter at BankshotPod. We do not have a Facebook page, but you can find American Banker at www.americanbanker.com.
Cool. Is there a
And-
discount code we can plug?
/subscribe and no.
Damn it!
Working on
All
it.
right, John, thank you so much for being here. We will have you back soon,
You bet, man.
possibly to talk about when the quantum computer finally becomes alive and is nano eating us with its little robots.
I would look forward to. I for one welcome our robot overlords.
Yeah.
I want to see an
Alright, thank you very
episode where
What? Sorry, Casey, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say I want to see an episode where John interviews Watson from IBM.
That's actually a good idea.
No, that's our spin-off podcast. We try to turn Watson racist.
No, you teach Watson
Not
to be a
racist.
podcast host, and then we're all out of jobs.
I love it. Thank you.
Watson
All right,
learns
we'll
how
be
to.
right back with the rest of this episode. Thank you, John, for coming along.
Happy to help. Thanks for having me.
Adios.
That was cool.